Last year, a film came out that I found highly imaginative, was directed with the proper zest, and had a youthful spirit I appreciated. The film was decently reviewed and got a solid reception, so admittedly, this is not the type of movie I normally do a defense on. However, Ready Player One did find a number of detractors both prior and after its release, primarily due to its depiction of a future filled with people obsessed with popular culture. One of the biggest remarks about Ready Player One is how the filmmakers and visual effects artists filled the screen with all sorts of references. Yes, we do see the likes of Marvin the Martian and Harley Quinn hanging around in the background, and the main protagonist, Wade Watts, drives a DeLorean. However, these are primarily there as window dressing. Ready Player One depicts a virtual version of the internet, and go on any social media platform or YouTube or Twitch, and you'll see people referencing the popular culture they love in some ways. It also fits thematically with the story being told. Steven Spielberg has not just thrown these characters in just for the fun of it, and he actually made the decision to not include any nods to films he himself has directed. The idea behind the virtual reality world of the Oasis is that its creator, James Halliday, was obsessed with the movies and video games he loved as a child in the 1980s, and that fueled a lot of his work. He was nostalgic to a fault, something not picked up on by the people who worship him in the future. Spielberg is a smart filmmaker, and knows that while flashy technology is neat, it's all about creating a compelling story with characters we want to follow on their journey. Just because something has characters from different properties crossing over does not automatically make it good. Otherwise, Rugrats Go Wild would be a masterpiece. But I admit to being rather confused at the disgust people were having towards Ready Player One featuring these cameos. When Bowser and Sonic the Hedgehog were advertised as being in Wreck-It Ralph, people lost their minds. Similarly, when the Disney princesses were revealed to cameo in Ralph Breaks the Internet. So why Ready Player One elicited responses from people claiming it was being pandering by including these video game and movie references, I have no idea. The whole plot of the movie revolves around finding secret keys hidden by Halliday in the Oasis. Finding those keys requires the players to have knowledge of his obsessions, and that's why you have the characters spouting off popular culture, facts, and references. However, through this challenge, they also learn Halliday's regrets and come away with a larger lesson about the friends made along the way and the importance of not getting so lost in our technology and pastimes. The screenplay cleverly peppers these human elements throughout the story, and they also show what sets Wade apart from the central villain, Nolan Sorrento. It's not knowledge of pop culture that saves the day, but ultimately recognizing what makes one a good person. This is also shown through Wade teaming up with close friends he trusts, versus Nolan, who merely assigns a number to a bunch of nameless employees. Regarding the characters, I thought Wade Watts managed to be a lead character to root for. I like seeing the dynamic between him and Artemis, as well as his friendship with Age. Wade does represent many of the people in the Oasis, just trying to escape his terrible life in a world where anyone can be anything. There was a common criticism that he was too perfect, and seemed to solve everything. The film was not afraid of making him a bit full of himself at times, and how he learns to grow beyond his popular culture knowledge. He also lets his emotions get the better of him at times. The filmmakers also make sure to have Artemis be an equal participant in this journey. In solving one of the keys, it's even Artemis who takes the leap and figures out the solution. I also like the glimpses we get of Mark Rylance as Halliday. He conveys a lot about the character through his body language, and there's a sympathetic element to Halliday, and Spielberg gives us just enough information to understand his backstory. I felt Nolan proved to be a strong villain. Ben Mendelsohn does seem to have been typecast in big Hollywood productions as a sneering villain, but the filmmakers properly show he is the opposite of Halliday, and he makes for an antagonist we can hate. Then there are the incredible visuals. Steven Spielberg has become one of those directors with the adventures of Tintin, the BFG, and Ready Player One who knows how to use motion capture technology. We spend most of the film in the Oasis, and the effects team did an exceptional job of portraying the characters' avatars. We see traces of Wade and Samantha in Percival and Artemis, and that allows Ty Sheridan and Olivia Cooke's performances to come through. Production designer Adam Stockhausen also deserves credit for his designs of both the Oasis and the real world outside. He essentially had to design two movies at once, and he succeeded brilliantly. One of Steven Spielberg's strengths is how he uses the camera as a storytelling tool. Even without Wade's narration, the opening tracking shot explains so much about this futuristic depiction of Columbus, Ohio, and the inhabitants of these stacks. The action sequences are phenomenally directed. Spielberg understands the importance of blocking and where to place characters and props in a shot, so nothing ever becomes chaotic and hard to follow. The New York race sequence is a perfect example. There are all sorts of vehicles and creatures flying and jumping and driving across the screen, and it's incredibly exciting. Even the climactic battle, which has all sorts of virtual characters charging and fighting, and the camera is zooming by at all sorts of angles, never becomes a headache. I have to mention Sarah Brochar and Spielberg's longtime editor Michael Kahn for cutting the action scenes so brilliantly. One of the big centerpieces of Ready Player One was the Shining sequence, in which our heroes end up in the famous Stanley Kubrick horror film. Visual effects supervisor Roger Guyett and his team did a remarkable job of recreating the Overlook Hotel and seamlessly placing the characters within that iconic location. Even the camera shots are perfectly recreated, and knowing that Spielberg and Kubrick were close friends makes it all the more heartwarming that he would dedicate the whole sequence to his work. Ready Player One is currently nominated for a Best Visual Effects Oscar, and if I was an Academy voter, it would certainly get my vote in that category. There's also Alan Silvestri's score, which has the proper amount of whimsy to it. With Spielberg's usual composer, John Williams, unavailable, Silvestri was the next best choice, and he created a memorable piece of music that managed to both recall his work on the Back to the Future films and also work on its own. The melodies range from beautiful to exciting to triumphant, like the best science fiction film scores often do. However, even with all the technology and whiz-bang action scenes, what I find most appealing in Ready Player One is that recognizable Spielberg spark. Steven Spielberg is one of our most storied filmmakers, and he has successfully been able to jump between various genres. He's had periods where he's tackled more serious subjects and has done it superbly. And yet he has never lost that want of lifting the audience up and showing his characters in awe. There's frequently that moment in a Spielberg film where a major character comes face to face with that thing they've longed for, and there's that expression of wonderment, whether it's Roy Neary coming across the alien mothership in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or Indiana Jones locating the Holy Grail in The Last Crusade, or Jamie seeing a warplane in Empire of the Sun. Ready Player One has that scene too, where Wade finally comes face to face with his hero. And where do they meet? In a virtual recreation of Halliday's childhood home. And when Halliday is talking to Wade and congratulating him, it's like Spielberg is talking directly to us. We, the audience, have happily allowed him to treat us to his wondrous imagination and filmmaking, and it just brought a smile to my face. Spielberg's films have that power to uplift us and amaze us, and I know he has been criticized for being manipulative, but his movies will live on and be remembered long after we've even forgotten the names of his critics. And that brings us to the final thing I want to discuss, which is the pre-release conversations about Ready Player One. Before the movie was released, there was this weird backlash against the film, and rather vocal people were expressing the idea that there was no way it could work. Their arguments stemmed from how much they hated the book. Now, I've not read Ernest Cline's book, so I don't have an opinion on it. What I found strange was this notion that Spielberg makes word-for-word adaptations of the source material he adapts, even though history has shown that is not the case at all. Peter Benchley's book Jaws has a love triangle between Chief Brody, his wife, and Matt Hooper that's like straight out of a soap opera, along with a mafia subplot. For the movie, no mention of those plot lines. In Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, John Hammond is portrayed as a greedy businessman, more concerned of how much money he's going to lose from the park's disastrous malfunctions. Very different from the optimistic Walt Disney-type figure Richard Attenborough portrayed in Spielberg's film. You may notice that in the cases of Jaws and Jurassic Park, much like Ready Player One, the original authors were credited as co-writers. The reason is Spielberg is known for being collaborative and likes working with the authors of the source material he adapts and deciding alongside them what to change, add, and remove during the screenwriting process. I think what most attracts Spielberg to a film is the concept and general idea, and the images already start swirling around in his head. It's not surprising, being a video game aficionado and someone with a real fascination for the newest technology, he would gravitate towards Ready Player One. However, beyond this, what most bothered me was the complete disrespect shown towards Spielberg prior to the release of Ready Player One. I saw so many proclamations that he was past his prime and hadn't made a great film in years, like he was some has-been director, and it saddens me to see people say this. If you read about Spielberg's work ethic, he is passionate about every project he works on, about getting to work with his closest collaborators and finding new ways to tell certain stories. It's like people just erased all of his past achievements from their memory. Most of all, and this is a surprisingly controversial viewpoint, I think criticizing a director's film without watching it first is enormously disrespectful. Directors make movies to be seen in context, the full story playing out all edited together with all the visual and oral elements in place just as they intended. To already declare something terrible without seeing the whole film first is doing a disservice to the hard work the filmmakers put into it. I hated reading the so-called hot takes about the new Steven Spielberg film before people even got a glimpse of the completed film. Frankly, I don't know why every new Spielberg film is not an event. Why aren't they like Marvel movies with instant $100 million opening weekends? Well, his films are events to me, and Ready Player One represented another triumph for the famous bearded director. I found it a brilliant entertainment with many of his trademarks and a couple of new tricks. Spielberg may be 72 years old, but in my mind, he's still that young boy wonderkind, and Ready Player One is further proof of that. See you next time.